occasionally I run into people who, when we talk about economic differences and lifestyle differences, they say, well, I worked very hard for what I have. And I say, no doubt. And I know a whole lot of people who have worked every bit as hard or harder and have not been rewarded. What's with that? What's the story? How come they didn't get rewarded when they worked every bit as hard as you did? And if we say, well, it's not my problem, that's disconnecting and it fractures the relationship. And ultimately it's a lie, because what happens to somebody else, what happens to anybody else, is our problem, because it's part of what adds up to the collective world that we share. The world is a shared space. A lot of perspectives don't take that into consideration, but it really is, because every bit of air pollution that somebody sends up to the atmosphere in Los Angeles is going into the same atmosphere that at some point will float over London or Moscow or New Delhi or Beijing or anywhere else on the planet. It's all one atmosphere. Everything that goes up into it, regardless of where it comes from, creates a global environment that we've all contributed to, and if we've all contributed to the problem, it's imperative that we all contribute to the solution. And so when there is somebody who is having a life experience that is not positive, and they don't have the resources they need to get their needs met, it creates one individual, and perhaps if that pattern is repeated enough time, it creates a whole collection of individuals who don't have their needs met and are not going to be happy with the society and the situations and the programs that have been set up. And at some point, they're going to get tired of putting up with it. And that's where we start getting into criminal activity and such. You know, is it a crime if a starving person steals a piece of bread or steals a loaf of bread in order to feed him or herself? We would say yes, because everything's governed by an economic system. Somehow, then, we need to make sure that every hungry person gets the food they need so that they don't need to steal it. We need to be sure that everyone has legitimate ways to get their need met, because if we ignore that problem, it creates other problems for us. Only by creating win-win situations, by having this perspective that we're all in this together and the world is a shared space, we begin to understand that when somebody else wins, it creates a better world for us. If we live in a world where nobody goes hungry and everyone has everything they need, we may not need a police force anymore because nobody would have any reason to break the law. Obviously, it's a bit more complicated than that. That's a very simplistic way of describing it. But the point being, if we do a better job of taking care of each other, we have less to worry about in terms of all sorts of criminal activity. When we don't take care of each other, when we neglect loving each other, when we take the perspective that I'm the only one that matters, or the company is what matters, not the individuals, it's not an either-or situation. They both matter. The manager matters and the worker matters, and everyone matters and everything matters, and somebody else needs to have legitimate ways of meeting their needs, solving their problems, getting things resolved. If they don't have a legitimate way of accomplishing that sort of resolution, we can hardly blame them when they do something wrong, because they're no longer willing to tolerate being the one in need. There is no one for whom it's okay to leave them in need. Most of human history has been this demonstration of perspective of the predominant group, which is different in every case, all different races, all different nationalities, all different countries. I mean, in some sense, humanity, the history of humanity is a history of one people group displacing another at regular intervals. And just for the record, they weren't all white. There were people of every race and every religion and every description. When I was in graduate school, there seemed to be this ridiculous notion, ridiculous in my opinion, that racism was primarily a categorical societal conflict between white people and black people. The problem with that in that context was that the people with whom I spoke became totally blind to the occurrence of racism between any other race. That when someone black did something racist toward someone who was white, or Korean to Japanese, or Chinese to Thai, or Estonian to Russian, or Inuit to Eskimo, or Crow to Sioux Indian, Native American. There have been conflicts within and between every people group in human history. It's not, if only it were, a problem of specific categories, because then we could eliminate that category and the problem wouldn't exist anymore. But there's no category you can eliminate and eliminate racism, because it's this thing of perspective. Who is the oppressor and who is the victim? But in every situation throughout human history, regardless of who the participants are, anyone could be a perpetrator or a victim, depending on the circumstances. There is no one who has never been a perpetrator, and there's no one who has never been a victim. We've just done it in different ways, and we may not be very conscious of it, but it's still there. The point of, or the goal of creating a peaceful global community in which everyone is loved, we are pursuing wisdom, we are pursuing peaceful, harmonious ways of sharing this planet and of nurturing the planet so that it is sustainable, so that we can be here as long as the earth shall last. And perhaps by that time we will have developed some sort of spaceship so that when our own sun eventually goes through its life cycle and turns into, what did the scientists say? It has a life cycle, and then it goes into a red giant and then basically burns out. But it takes millions of years, but at some point it does happen. And if